What drives a dedicated monk to cross continents in search of change? In this episode, join Swami Vivekananda as he embarks on a journey that will bridge the East and West, propelled by a profound vision for India's revival. Welcome back to our series on Swami Vivekananda. In this episode, we witness Swamiji's transformative journey to the southern tip of India, where he grapples with the plight of his homeland and envisions a mission that would take him to America. Discover his profound reflections on India's condition, his quest for spiritual and societal renewal, and his bold plan to seek help from the West. Join us as we explore how his vision crystallizes into a historic venture that will shape the future of his country and beyond. Chapter 5. Trip to America. At Cape Comorin, the Swami became as excited as a child. He rushed to the temple to worship the Divine Mother. He prostrated himself before the Virgin Goddess. As he came out and looked at the sea, his eyes fell on a rock. Swimming to the islet through shark-infested waters, he sat on a stone. His heart thumped with emotion. His great journey from the snow-capped Himalayas to the land's end was completed. He had traveled the whole length of the Indian subcontinent, his beloved motherland, which, together with his earthly mother, was superior to heaven itself. Sitting on the stone, he recalled what he had seen with his own eyes, the pitiable condition of the Indian masses, victims of the unscrupulous whims of their rulers, landlords, and priests. The tyranny of caste had sapped their last drop of blood. In most of the so-called leaders who shouted from the housetops for the liberation of the people, he had seen selfishness personified. And now he asked himself what his duty was in this situation. Should he regard the world as a dream and go into solitude to commune with God? He had tried this several times, but without success. He remembered that as a sannyasin, he had taken the vow to dedicate himself to the service of God. But this God, he was convinced, was revealed through humanity. And his own service to this God must begin, therefore, with the humanity of India. "May I be born again and again," he exclaimed, "and suffer 1,000 miseries, if only I may worship the only God in whom I believe, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the afflicted, my God the poor of all races." Through austerity and self-control, the Swami had conserved great spiritual power. His mind had been filled with the wisdom of the East and the West. He had received in abundance Sri Ramakrishna's blessings. He also had had many spiritual experiences of his own. He must use all of these assets, he concluded, for the service of God in man. But what was to be the way? The clear-eyed prophet saw that religion was the backbone of the Indian nation. India would rise through a renewal and restoration of that highest spiritual consciousness which had made her, at all times, the cradle of nations and the cradle of faith. He totally disagreed with foreign critics and their Indian disciples who held that religion was the cause of India's downfall. The Swami blamed rather the falsehood, superstition, and hypocrisy that were practiced in the name of religion. He himself had discovered that the knowledge of God's presence in man was the source of man's strength and wisdom. He was determined to awaken this sleeping divinity. He knew that the Indian culture had been created and sustained by the twin ideals of renunciation and service, which formed the core of Hinduism. And he believed that if the national life could be intensified through these channels, everything else would take care of itself. The workers for India's regeneration must renounce selfishness, jealousy, greed, and lust for power, and they must dedicate themselves to the service of the poor, the illiterate, the hungry, and the sick, seeing in them the tangible manifestations of the Godhead. People required education, food, health, and the knowledge of science and technology to raise their standard of living. The attempt to teach metaphysics to empty stomachs was sheer madness. The masses everywhere were leading the life of animals on account of ignorance and poverty. Therefore, these conditions should be removed. But where would the Swami find the fellow workers to help him in this gigantic task? He wanted whole-time servants of God, workers without worldly ties or vested interests. And he wanted them by thousands. his eyes fell upon the numerous monks who had renounced the world in search of God. But alas, in present-day India, most of these led unproductive lives. He would have to infuse a new spirit into them, and they in their turn would have to dedicate themselves to the service of the people. He hit upon a plan which he revealed later in a letter to a friend. Suppose, the Swami wrote, some disinterested sannyasins bent on doing good to others went from village to village, disseminating education and seeking in various ways to better the condition of all, down to the untouchable, through oral teaching and by means of maps, magic lanterns, globes, and other accessories. Would that not bring forth good in time? All these plans I cannot write out in this brief letter. The long and short of it is that if the mountain does not come to Mahomet, Mahomet must go to the mountain. The poor are too poor to go to schools. They will gain nothing by reading poetry and all that sort of thing. We, as a nation, have lost our individuality. We have to give back to the nation its lost individuality and raise the masses. Verily, the Swami at Kanyakumari was the patriot and prophet in one. There he became, as he declared later to a Western disciple, a condensed India. But where were the resources to come from to help him realize his great vision? He himself was a sannyasin, a penniless beggar. The rich of the country talked big and did nothing. His admirers were poor. Suddenly a heroic thought entered his mind. He must approach the outside world and appeal to its conscience. But he was too proud to act like a beggar. He wanted to tell the West that the health of India and the sickness of India were the concern of the whole world. If India sank, the whole world would sink with her. For the outside world, in turn, needed India her knowledge of the soul and of God her spiritual heritage. Her ideal of genuine freedom through detachment and renunciation, it needed these in order to extricate itself from the sharp claws of the monster of materialism. Then to the Swami, brooding alone and in silence on that point of rock off the tip of India, the vision came. There flashed before his mind the new continent of America, a land of optimism, great wealth, and unstinted generosity. He saw America as a country of unlimited opportunities where people's minds were free from the encumbrance of castes or classes. He would give the receptive Americans the ancient wisdom of India and bring back to his motherland, in exchange, the knowledge of science and technology. If he succeeded in his mission to America, he would not only enhance India's prestige in the Occident, but create a new confidence among his own people. He recalled the earnest requests of his friends to represent India in the forthcoming Parliament of Religions in Chicago. And in particular, he remembered the words of the friends in Kathiawar who had been the first to encourage him to go to the West, go and take it by storm, and then return. He swam back to the continent of India and started northwards again, by the eastern coast. It may be mentioned here that during the Swami's trip across the country just described, there had taken place many incidents that strengthened his faith in God, intensified his sympathy for the so-called lower classes, and broadened his general outlook on life and social conventions. Several times, when he had had nothing to eat, food had come to him unsought from unexpected quarters. The benefactors had told him that they were directed by God. Then one day it had occurred to the Swami that he had no right to lead the life of a wandering monk, begging his food from door to door, and thus depriving the poor of a few morsels which they could otherwise share with their families. Forthwith he entered a deep forest and walked the whole day without eating a grain of food. At nightfall he sat down under a tree, footsore and hungry, and waited to see what would happen next. Presently he saw a tiger approaching. "Oh," he said, "this is right, both of us are hungry. As this body of mine could not be of any service to my fellow men, let it at least give some satisfaction to this hungry animal." He sat there calmly, but the tiger, for some reason or other, changed its mind and went off in another direction. The Swami spent the whole night in the forests, meditating on God's inscrutable ways. In the morning he felt a new surge of power. During his wanderings in the Himalayas, he was once the guest of a Tibetan family, and was scandalized to see that polyandry was practiced by its members, 6 brothers sharing a common wife. To the Swami's protest, the eldest brother replied that a Tibetan would consider it selfishness to enjoy a good thing all by himself and not share it with his brothers. After deep thought, the Swami realized the relativity of ethics. He saw that many so-called good and evil practices had their roots in the traditions of society. One might argue for or against almost anything. The conventions of a particular society should be judged by its own standards. After that experience, the Swami was reluctant to condemn hastily the traditions of any social group. In our next episode, we'll delve into the poignant moments of Swami Vivekananda's life as he prepares for his journey to America. From his interactions with people of all walks of life to the profound realizations that shaped his mission. Join us as we explore how his experiences deepened his resolve and led him to take a historic step onto the global stage. Don't miss this chapter of transformation and dedication as Swamiji embarks on a journey that will leave a lasting impact on both East and West. Thank you for listening till the end. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications, like, comment, and share with your friends. This will help more listeners to discover our channel and content.